So Mike, I know you are an engineer from your heart. How important the coding skill is when you start growing up, say you become CTO or a director of engineering, how important coding skill still needed there in that position? Because I have a lot of argument with a lot of people. That's why I asked this question to all senior managers.
This is hotly debated. And like I said, I love differing points of view. But I'll tell you what my point of view in it.
Sure.
You always want to be doing level appropriate work. Level appropriate work. If I'm the CEO, is writing code, was writing my 5 lines of code a day of crappy code because my skills are completely obsolete.
Right.
Is that level appropriate work?
Yeah.
Right? In other words, how am I going to get promoted? In other words, what if I put this on, I want to be promoted because I wrote 5 lines of code yesterday that broke. I mean, really? So I think it depends. You say, well, where's the answer? It depends. If you were in a startup, right, where people need it, that it's needed, you just do whatever's needed to do the job. And frankly, I love people to write code every day. That would be my preference because you're staying deep in the technology, but you're superficial.
Right.
So my preference tends to be is I want somebody like an architect or somebody that's a principal or a staff engineer on my team that is the master of coding, that does it 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, and is the master. They're far superior than I would ever be.
Right.
That doesn't mean I don't want to read the code, look at the code, have a real understanding of what goes on, how hard is it to integrate, those kind of things. But in terms of writing code every day, and I'll tell you, I remember the day in my career. I can remember the day, I don't remember the year, but I remember the day I was sitting in my office, and my goal and what I'd always said to people, never stop coding. Never stop coding, because the number of doors that are open for you gets closed when you stop coding. Because a lot of places want their managers to code.
Right, right.
Why? Because they want them to be technical. Well, that sort of ensures that they're technical. They might not be technical in the right areas, but they're certainly technical in something. It shows a passion for writing code.
True.
And of course, developers love that because that's what their language of communication is. So that's a good language of communication. I just thought of a story that I got to share it.
Sure.
I'll share a story. I didn't think of this one. When I was at Huawei in China, I didn't speak any Mandarin, and the teammates that I had and stuff weren't speaking English. But you know,
so you were there for 2 years?
A year and a half.
Year and a half.
Year and a half.
Okay.
Year and a half. Amazing experience, incredible experience, best time of my life. And you know, it's kind of an architect type role. You know, and I was developing the next generation of developers. Huawei put a huge value on developing people, so I was really aligned with what they do. Their philosophy is develop people. And let's see, where was I going with that? And so, you know, these folks commit themselves to learning, and they're constantly studying.
Right.
I'm trying to think of where I was.
You were talking about coding skill.
Oh yeah. Okay. So here's the language. So I don't speak Mandarin.
Right.
My teammates don't speak English, but they speak JavaScript. So I learned to code. This was funny. I didn't learn to code. I was still coding, but I was writing code to communicate what I wanted in terms of requirements. So I would code up an example in PowerShell or JavaScript or whatever the language was, or Java, whatever the language around.
Yeah.
So I would code up an example, and they would look at that. Now I understand what you want.
Right.
Because me describing what I wanted in English was completely ineffective.
Right.
It wasn't easy. And so we used programming language as the neutral language to communicate. The second thing I used was testing use cases. So the combination of some code examples. Now, I didn't consider myself a quality coder at that point, but I could still write code, but I could do it well enough to get the communication of what I wanted across.
Right,
and then they would productionize it, right?
Right.
And then I would say, what are the use cases and how do you test the use cases? So I put together a test scenario. Here's the test matrix for how we're going to test the system. From that, they understood what we needed to build. So the interesting thing was I used code in other words, it was the uniform language. The common language was not English or Mandarin. The common language was JavaScript and PowerShell, those kind of things.
True.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
You're like really using code as the, yes, it works brilliantly for engineers. And they loved it because they're like, this dude's, you know, this senior dude is writing code. So they thought it was kind of cool. But the important point was it was used as a communication tool.
Right. No, so my you know, the reasoning to ask that, of course, I don't expect CTO to write code because that's really...
Should be able to read it.
Should be able to read it, understand the right design, like where the you know, the chief architect comes and gives you something, because I think that's very important for senior managers, leadership of engineering, to understand those things. Because I see the young guys, they run after any shiny object.
That's right.
Right?
Yes.
They'll say, oh, this is a new platform release, let's do everything there and let's write everything in F# because it's a new language on the block. So in that sense, I feel at least it's very important for senior engineering leader to understand the technology.
Absolutely.
And should be able to
Absolutely.
read the
Which
code
is different
too.
from being when I think of coding, I want a professional that's teaching the rest of the team. And
true.
so I'm not going to be the one teaching them how to best implement the latest language and latest
Right.
feature, but you're right. What I call is a working knowledge.
True.
You need a working knowledge of the design, the coding, the APIs. What I care about really is the data model and the interfaces.
Yes.
Is the data model that we're using reflective of reality? Can we properly model? Because if the data model's off, you're in deep trouble.
Yes.
So if you get the data model right, and then we want a staff engineer, principal engineer, or architect type that is state of the art in terms of their coding skills.
Right.
So what they can do is they can actually teach the code and develop the next generation of engineers to be great coders.
True.
So I think it has value, but I wouldn't put such a huge amount of time on it that I'm taking away from my team. So let me finish the story when I was saying
Sure.
I woke up in my office. So I woke up in my office and I'm like, okay, tomorrow I'm going to stop writing code every day. The reason is I had a team of almost 100.
Right.
So I looked at the size of the team and the amount of teaching that I was going to need to do and the amount of business interaction that I was going to need to do, and I realized that I'm not doing level appropriate work. So that was the decision. That doesn't mean I didn't read other code and check the check-ins and look at stuff, but I realized that my greatest value was writing lines of code day to day was my greatest value, production code.
True.
But I certainly wouldn't discourage anybody from doing it because it'll keep them more employable.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, because they're developing their skills, they're becoming comfortable. And like I've always said, if you can do it, here's the other dimension. If it's a hobby, some people love writing code.
Yeah.
So I say, bless you, do it. Because if that's your hobby, go do it. But if you have a different hobby that's not aligned with tech, so it's something away from that, you've got a limited amount of hours. And so you've got to figure out how many hours do I have and how much level appropriate work can I do during those hours.
Right.
And then also, what do I have in the team? In other words, that function has to be there. You need a world-class coder in your team that can teach the rest of them, the rest of us, right?
True.
And so you have to have that. And that ideally probably isn't also the manager, because they're probably going to take time away that they should be doing to develop these other folks' careers.
True.
So that would be the balance. But I'm going to make sure you have somebody on the team that has spectacular state-of-the-art skills. But you got to know the design, you got to know the interfaces, you got to know the adopters, what their experience is. I heard Jay mention make sure you eat your own dog food. Absolutely.
Right.
So you're experiencing what your customers experience, because if you feel their pain, you will fix those things that are causing them pain. If you don't feel their pain, you're unlikely to fix it.
Of course. Cool. So, Mike,